I think BMC are one of the best companies out there at filling the different sorts of niche a bike rider might want. You've got your altitude series, so SLR01, which is an amazing climbing bike. You've got the Gran Fondo. You could ride it for hours and hours, it won't beat you up. It'll look after you well. It's got fat tyres, disc brakes, and it's got that sort of a geometry where the front is a little bit taller, so you're not bent over quite as much. There's the Time Machine Race, which is a full on aero bike that's really aggressive, just meant to go fast, no compromises anywhere. And then you've got the time trial bike on top of that. All of these choices are brilliant if you want to have a bike to do a particular job. So what BMC have done with this Roadmachine is tried to sort of blend the lines between the SLR, the GF, and partly the aero bike as well, because this has elements of all three, and very cleverly allow it to fit just about any rider in almost any position, which will match their fit for a GF or an SLR01, for example. To make the bikes fit, what BMC have done is create their own integrated stem. On this model, it's called the ICS, Integrated Cockpit System. Essentially what that means is, with a range of fitting options that will be available to dealers, you have different stem lengths. You also have two headset top cap cones of different heights, plus a range of spacers, all of which are proprietary to this stem and headset combination. The transition from the stem into the frame is really smooth. It's just almost seamless. This bike runs Di2, so there's minimal cabling, it's just the wires which are easier to handle. But it does have disc brakes. Both hydraulic hoses run into the bottom of the stem, pass above a plate, and then either side of the steerer. The steerer tube is actually flat rather than being round. It's kind of a rectangle, so on each side of it there's a space, and the hoses run down that space into the frame for the rear one and further on down the fork leg for the front. That keeps everything completely neat and tidy, very, very internal, and very slick looking. There's so many elements of aero road bike to this bike. This particular model is the highest in the range. It comes with complete Dura-Ace Di2 group set. This one's got a compact chain set, 5034. It's 1128 cassette, which is fine most of the time. You wouldn't race on it, but it makes a lot of sense for some parts of the world. This bike runs a 160mm front rotor and a 140mm on the back, but it's designed that you could change both of those to 140 at both ends, 160 both ends. The rear will just take a conventional spacer to move it out to be 160mm compatible. Whereas the fork has an integrated adapter, which by moving some bolts and shifting the caliper allows you to run a 160mm rotor without any extra spaces required. For extra comfort, BMC have used a seat post similar to the one they had on the SLR01, which is their D compliance seat post. That means basically it's shaped like a D if you look at it in cross section. The shape allows the seat post to flex more easily fore and aft, which just gives it much more comfort. The wheel set on this bike is DT Swiss RC38C spline, so that's a carbon clincher to you and I. But interestingly, it runs 28mm tyres as standard. These are Continental Grand Prix 4000Ss, and in 28mm form, there's barely heavier than a 25, and the volume is much, much greater. The difference that gives you is an extra bit of comfort, a larger contact patch on the road, so you've got a lot more grip when you're cornering and so on. And if you want to take this bike onto some gravel, some cobbles, or super rough roads, you've just got extra comfort from the ground up. This particular bike is 56 centimetres, weighs 7.54 kilos, which is pretty reasonable for a bike of this kind of spec that will do what this bike can do. And the riding I've done so far on it, on the flat, it's like a very, very fast road bike. You wouldn't distinguish it from anything else. There's no sloppiness, it's not slow to steer, and in the corners, it's just as snappy as anything else I've ridden. It's very, very stable because in creating this bike, the stays are still short and responsive, but the wheelbase as a whole is longer. This model, the wheelbase is 1008mm long, which is about between 5 and 10mm longer than I would expect for a bike that fits me. That means if the road's really rough, say you're on cobbles, gravel or whatever, or on a steep descent, the bike's much more stable. It'll roll over the bumps, it'll roll over holes, anything, with much less chance of it deviating from its line. But that doesn't mean it's slow. This bike isn't quite as quick on a climb as BMC's SLR01, which is extraordinarily quick on a climb, but it's no slouch. When you get to that sort of low gear territory where you're grinding up a long climb, if you step on the pedals, the snap from the back end of this bike is, you can feel it. It's like a little kick in the pants. And coming down, it's just solid as a rock because you've got the extra wheelbase length, you've got these bigger tyres, you've got great grip in the corners, and it just handles intuitively. You can really feel it. It's kind of seat of the pants all the way, really. In an exercise to try and cross that line between an endurance bike and a very fast road bike, I think it's a great success. The fact that it's got 28mm tyres on it is unusual, but from the first 5 minutes of riding it, you forget about all of that because you can run the same sort of pressures and you get the same sort of feel. Yes, the at-road acceleration from a standing start is slightly slower, but then we're splitting hairs, to be honest. This bike was aimed to be ridden last year in the Tour of Switzerland by a couple of BMC professionals. That's because the UCI's ban on disc brakes was due to be rescinded at that point, so they could have raced it. At the last minute, it couldn't happen, they didn't race it. But this bike's designed to go underneath the pro team, so when the ban does drop again, which I suspect it probably will, you'll be seeing this bike in the pro peloton. Unfortunately, there is a downside to a bike as special as this. In this spec, a Roadmachine 01, Durex Di2, carbon clinchers, and all of the integrated stem and everything else. In the UK, it'll set you back £8,800, which is definitely squarely into superbike territory. It's on a par with other race bikes you'll see underneath the pro team, so in that respect, it's not a surprise. There are cheaper options. There's the Roadmachine 02 and 03. The 02 uses slightly more economical carbon, so it's a bit cheaper. There's different group set specs, of course, and a bit less integration with the stem. And the Roadmachine 03 is aluminium framed, so clearly you've got a much greater saving from the off. The irony is, in a way, that in crossing the boundaries between a couple of bike niches, with endurance, altitude, bit of aero, it almost creates another niche. This is a bike that can do many more things, and I expect we'll see more of them as well. Maybe this is the first, and maybe, just maybe, it could be one of the best.